Welcome back. Turkish officials this morning confirming 41 people are dead and more than 239 injured following a terrorist attack in Istanbul yesterday. Is the Obama administration's strategy enough to stop the rising threat from the Islamic State? We want to bring in former Assistant Secretary of Defense Larry Korb. Secretary, good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Nice to be with you again.
Characterize the administration's response to terrorism so far.
Well, I think they have appropriately, because what they're doing is trying to undermine the ISIS gains in the Middle East, in Iraq and Syria, to show that they're not the future of the Islamic world. And then we've increased our intelligence cooperation with countries around the world to prevent them from having these type of attacks.
How have they done that? What you're saying seems fine, but how specifically have they actually undermined ISIS? It seems to everybody else that ISIS has only gotten stronger, sir.
Well, no, ISIS hasn't won a battle in over a year, and they just lost
Well, they just killed 41
Fallujah.
people in Istanbul.
I understand that. We have had more people killed by radical terrorists not associated with Islam in this country in the last year. So you've got what they're basically doing, and I think Secretary Kerry is right. When you're not winning in one battlefield, you're going to try and go to another. Remember, Turkey is an Islamic country. They're upset because Turkey has allowed us to use the Incirlik air base to go after ISIS in Syria.
So what's the explanation of San Bernardino? What's the explanation for Orlando?
Well, the explanation is that, well, you got two things. This probably was organized by ISIS. The others are lone wolf attacks. And you got people, you know, we've had this ever since Oklahoma City, where people are inspired by some, you know, radical idea and figure this is the way to accomplish it. You know, this is the fourth attack that Turkey has had in the last year, and they all started when they allowed us to use the base at Incirlik to go after ISIS and began to turn the tide against them on the ground.
I mean, how can you consider, you know, this, you know, him doing a good job or Obama doing a good job if this keeps happening, though? So you're saying that he doesn't need to change anything? Because this, more and more, you hear of ISIS attacks. Yesterday, Orlando, like you're saying, it's all the time.
Well, again...
And you think the president's doing a good job on this? Is that what you're saying, that the administration's doing a good job?
I think he's doing the appropriate job, because if you overreact, you're only going to make the situation worse.
What is appropriate
I don't think we're in any risk of overreacting.
Yeah.
But, I mean, so are you saying that how much worse would it have been if the Obama administration had actually gotten tougher in the Middle East? If he had forced some of these companies to do more to wipe out the radical Islamic, basically recruiting tools that are all over the internet?
You've got to remember, we changed Turkey's original policy was to get rid of Assad. They enabled ISIS to start by a lot of the things that they did. They were allowing people to go in and fight against Assad who turned out to go with ISIS. We got them to change their mind. We've got 60 nations there. We've just taken back Fallujah. We're on our way to get Mosul. We've cut the supply line between Raqqa and Mosul, so we're prevailing on the
Secretary, do you not take issue with the fact that the president came out and he drew a red line and he said you cannot use chemical weapons, and then all of a sudden they did, and they called his bluff, and now there's a huge power vacuum in the Middle East because they know that the United States will not do anything. We used to have policies where we would speak softly and carry a big stick, and now we are a laughing stock.
Well, two things. That was against Assad, not against ISIS, okay? And he didn't use them because two things. Congress wouldn't approve it, and then the Russians worked with us. We got rid of all the chemical weapons. That had nothing to do with ISIS. ISIS didn't even exist back then.
But makes us look weak. The president consistently hasn't needed Congress to do anything. He's been using executive actions, especially when he's using drones across the globe and he's fighting all these terrorists. So I don't understand when you're saying he needs congressional approval.
No, Congress wouldn't give him the approval, okay? Now, I think we ought to have a new authorization for the use of military force, you know, in Iraq now, just as President Bush did before he went in the first time. Now, the Congress was not doing anything, and then the Russians stepped up to the plate. So he accomplished his objectives without the loss of any American lives.
All right, so just to be clear, Larry, as we wrap up here, you think that the foreign policy as it relates to ISIS has been a success then?
I think it's the correct policy, and yes, and it's the one that will enable us eventually to prevail. It's not going to be quick, just like the Cold War wasn't quick.
Larry, thanks very much. Larry Korb joining us there.